Well, hey, Tom, thanks for jumping on to the podcast with us. Excited to talk to you about your new book and leadership, ministry, all kinds of stuff. I'm sure we're going to go all kinds of directions. So thanks for jumping on.
Ryan, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. I'm excited to jump in. I love this audience. I love the focus of this show. So I can't wait to be really specific and not so generic like sometimes you have to be when you're talking leadership stuff. So thank you. I'm honored.
Yeah, Tom, I just remember driving from Lancaster all the way through the desert, all the way to hang out with you guys a couple of times, do services with you guys. So always fun. And then you were in the district office there in Southern California. So would love to kind of unpack that. But I mean, from what I remember, right, you didn't really grow up in the church, right? So I mean, that's like a big shift for you. So talk to us about that journey.
Oh, massive shift, yes. And it might be hard to know, or if you saw me, I don't necessarily look like the picture of my upbringing, not intentionally, or even my like. Let me just say this up front. My favorite kind of music is gangster rap music because I grew up in the hood, right? I mean, I grew up very much so in the hood, rough upbringing, did not go to church. I mean, the name Jesus was a swear word in our household for forever. And, I talk a little bit about this in the book. First time I got high on drugs, 7 years old, and I stole it from my dad. And my punishment was, hey, boy, this was his words verbatim, boy, you don't steal from your old man. So it wasn't that I got high. It wasn't that I was doing drugs. It was like, find your own stash, find your own source, but you don't steal from me, dude. That's mine. So that was just kind of the upbringing and that was normal for us. It wasn't even chaos. It was just, that was how we define normal. So yeah. So that going from that, what that ultimately did was it made me a pretty good youth pastor because I could read those kids from a mile away. Um, I could just tell, because there was so much street in me, I could see it in them, and I'm like, "Hey, you need to quit having sex. Hey, you need to quit doing drugs. What are you talking about, Pastor Tom?" I'm like, "Nope, doesn't work for me." So, it is kind of funny. So, as a district leader for Southern California Assemblies of God, it's kind of funny. I'm like, I wonder if they know who the guy is that they've put in leadership. Like, I don't
You
really have
sure?
the
Are you sure about this?
yeah, I don't really have the pedigree for this, but here we are as we just kind of walk through it, and God sets us up that way. Yeah,
I
it's
love it. I love
incredible.
it. I love it. So many journeys. I mean, I didn't grow up in the church either, and so it's really awesome to see how God takes that journey in our life and uses it to help other people, right? And so, your book would love for you to just kind of give us just real quick, just kind of a big overview. I know you're talking about awakening greatness inside of us, so just kind of give us a snapshot of the book.
Yeah, so the elevator pitch, as I guess I would call it, is it's a little bit of my story, right, and my rough upbringing. Again, drugs, chaos, blah blah blah. I actually became a Christ follower at the age of 14 while I was high on LSD acid that I got from a Grateful Dead show. I know that dates me a little bit, but so that's at 14. So imagine and that was normal. So imagine all the chaos around that. So pretty much the book is, hey, we all have a story. We all have some crap in our life. And the truth of the matter is, let's stop being a victim of our story and start being the victor of our story, that God's still writing the script. And so here's how to take those ingredients and learn how to, the title of the book's The Life You're Meant to Lead. And essentially, both in myself and my family members and the people that I led in ministry, they would say, "Oh, I would have been so much further if my pastor hadn't, or if my pastor had. I would have been further along if my parents hadn't, or if my parents had." And the truth is, we all have those kinds of stories in our life, no matter what our upbringing was. And it's like, wait, Tom is the life I'm meant to lead. I've got to lead myself through that. And so God's created us uniquely. That means, we're created with greatness inside of us. There's no mistake about us. Even if there's things we'd like to change, God didn't make mistakes. He made us uniquely with greatness and a mission or a purpose to impact the world. So how do we lead ourselves to become that person with that purpose, doing what ultimately God designed when he imagined us. So that's what the 10 chapters in the book are about.
I love it. So there's parents out there, there's youth pastors, kids pastors, even lead pastors, right? That are looking at maybe their own kid, maybe kid in the youth ministry, kids ministry that maybe was you at
Mm-hmm.
14.
Yeah.
Um, Word of encouragement, word of advice for them, their kid just, going to Grateful Dead, right? Or whatever
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
current version of it, right? And kind of on drug. Man, what advice, what hope, what encouragement would you give to that person?
Yeah. There's really two things I would say about that. First and foremost, I had a relentless youth pastor. I mean, I showed up, and again, I don't know if they're listening or watching right now how we're recording this, but I showed up. I am a Caucasian white guy, in case you're just wondering. I grew up in Northern California. In We had the highest murder rate per capita of any city in California, more than Compton, more than LA, more than Boys in the Hood, if you saw that movie, or Colors, or whatever you want to think about. It was worse where we lived. And so the first time I showed up to church, I'm dealing drugs. I'm the center of the party. I'm like 13 years old. I've got chain necklaces around. I got rings on every finger. I literally look like a little white Mr. T. And and this youth pastor was relentless in seeing greatness in me. I didn't see it in myself. I was trying to chase pleasure and run away from pain, and he saw greatness in me. And so he would come up to me every week and say, Jesus loves you, has a plan for your life. And this is what I would say. Every success that I've ever had in my life, it's because someone else saw the potential and greatness in me first. Even to, like, we're talking today, like, okay, Tom wrote a book. That didn't happen because I just one day thought, oh, I should write a book. There was some significant voices in my life, and it's like, you should write that book. What? I'm not an author. I'm just a kid from the ghetto or whatever. But it took those kinds of people that God brought along my path to see the potential and the greatness within me. I didn't see it in myself. They saw it in me first. And so I would just challenge anybody that's listening that they're in a unique position to, and they need the help of the Holy Spirit. They need the help of God's guidance to say, God, help me look past the behavior, because there was nothing great about my behavior. I can tell you that much right now. Nothing great about my behavior. Can I look past the behavior and see the possibilities and see the greatness? Not that we excuse sin. I'm not ever suggesting that, oh, let's just cover that up and let's ignore that, Tommy's sleeping around with some other girl on his shoulder here at youth group. The youth leadership team literally called me Hormone because they didn't know my name, right? They were like, hey, Hormones. It'd go over the radio. Hey, Hormones on campus, all eyes and ears open. Let's watch for them. And it was like, but they looked past that behavior and saw the potential and the greatness. And so I would just say that. And then the second thing, and this is probably, if I were to step into local youth ministry all over again, something that I would be better at. I don't think, you mentioned the desert and coming over to Victorville. I was the youth pastor in Victorville for almost 5 years. And, think about, I probably preached 42 to 48 sermons a year out of those 5 years. I don't think a single student remembers a word I said. I don't remember it. And I would be like, I would be less about the performance of ministry or the presentation of ministry and more about the opportunity of ministry, just creating a safe place for kids to fail. They're going to fail. I mean, that's the human story, is that we all have failed somewhere. I mean, I failed probably this week talking to my kids, or, something at job or work, right? It's just part of it. But can we make our ministries more about a safe place to fail, where we can fumble around in who God has created us to be and wants us to be? And my greatest successes in ministry has been those kids who did terrible at that sermon or terrible at that song. And they were like, but it was you, Pastor Tom, who gave me a shot. It was you who believed in me. And it's like, yeah, you know what? I don't remember any sermons my youth pastor preached to me, but I certainly remember how much he loved me and the team loved me. So that would be the two things of encouragement that I would try to just give to everybody when it
So you
comes to
talked about
ministry.
people reaching out, kind of calling the greatness out of you. I think a lot of times we got to feel a little bit of that inside of ourselves before we can call it out in somebody else. Right. And so what would you say to that person that's maybe feeling a little bit inadequate, feeling over their head, and be like, man, who am I to call the greatness out of somebody else? Or who am I, like you even said, like, who am I to be an author? Who am I to be that? Right. And so would you say that person just kind of feeling inadequate, like, man, I can't really do all that?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, not to get over spiritual, so I'll give a spiritual answer and a non-spiritual answer just so we can like be
That's fair.
real,
Sounds
be
fair to
real
me.
and raw about it, right? So the spiritual truth of the matter is that it's our inadequacies that actually qualify us. That God doesn't want to use the people that should be doing it. He wants to use the people who shouldn't be doing it. And I don't mean that like as in sinful. I just mean as in like qualities and quantities and all the things that we paint in our mind as somebody who, oh, if I was a better speaker or better organized or better, if I had my stuff together better, if I actually read my Bible every single day instead of skipping a day or two, or whatever the thing is that we just think really we're not adequate at spiritual leaders. It's like, yeah, God wants to use the dummy things in us to confound the wise, right? So
Mm,
that's the truth of the matter. And then the second thing is, and this is even about the book, right? So I'll say this: the dream of writing a book happened in me in 2009, and I wrote the table of contents of what if okay, Tom, if I'm going to write a book, these are the 10 things I want to talk about. And I wrote literally on a little notepad on my iPad the table of contents, and then it stayed on the shelf for 10 years. And Ryan, if I'm being honest, the reason it stayed on the shelf was because I wanted to write a book in 2009 to be famous and significant,
mm,
right? I wanted to be popular and I wanted to be invited to all the conferences and conventions to be the speaker and be, whoa, this famous guy. And it just, every time I tried to write, I couldn't write. I was inadequate to write, blah, 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 blah. But when it started happening, when like the content really started to flow and it was like, hey, now we're taking action, was when I was not intrigued by being famous or significant or important, but it was like, I actually have something where I could add value to people. And once I got that into an alignment in my heart, going, hey, there's greatness in me because of what God's done that can awaken greatness in others. That I really use the pitfalls of my journey, not the successes of my journey, to try to awaken others. If you read the book, you'd be like, this guy's jacked up. Right. So there's not a lot of highlights that I bring out there. So it's a lot of pitfalls. You know what I mean? Because it was like, I'm not trying to brag about who I am and what I did, because that was really God covering up a ton of mistakes. So the truth of the matter is, if our motives, this is where I was going with the non-spiritual answer side of things. If our motives is to be significant, we're always going to be inadequate.
mm,
If our motive is to awaken greatness, we're going to figure out, hey, there's some wisdom inside of us, probably because of our mistakes and our inadequacies where we fumbled around and got it wrong. There's some wisdom that we can impart to others. That's great. There's not a lot of wisdom being shared with people. There's lessons and there's things inside of us, not because we're great, but because we're not great. That's how we can use that to awaken greatness in others, if that makes sense.
I love it. I love it. So, you talk about making some mistakes, some drugs, and all the kind of things. Man, have you ever I'm sure you've had those nights where you're like, is someone going to find out about this? And what happens if they do find out?
To be honest with you, I've been so open with my story. I haven't been worried about it from like a public persona standpoint, but where the insecurities on that and the question mark comes is that, I have two daughters, teenage daughters. My wife and I, we've been married 21 years, coming up on 22 years. So that's amazing. We have an 18-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old daughter. And you just kind of like, how much of my story do I want to tell them?
Mm,
Like, what if they find out? And how does that work? And honestly, this is just my personality. So I don't know that this is something that people should do. I'm just going to tell you what I did and then take it for what it's worth. Is that I just kind of decided I'm going to rebel against my fear.
mm,
That my fear of being found out is to out myself first. My fear of what my kids think of my story is I'm going to celebrate Jesus even more. that I've told all of the perils and pitfalls of my story to my kids and go, this is why daddy's radically in love with Jesus, because this is where I came. This is why Jesus is the center of our life. It's not because of church or where daddy gets his paycheck or because I have the title pastor. It's that this is why.
Mm.
And whether right or wrong or indifferent, I have some pretty remarkable kids. I think that's just Jesus making me look better than I am, and my wife being the awesome rock star that she is. But
Yeah.
they at least have a good understanding as to why daddy is radically in love with Jesus and not radically in love with his job or radically in love with how much time I have to spend at church, but I'm just radically in love with Jesus and I want everybody to know it, kind of thing. So I rebelled against that fear. That was kind of my simple answer of that. But it's real. It's not that I haven't experienced it. I just had to choose how I responded to it.
Just go right into it.
Yeah. Just go,
Just
I
lean
jumped
in.
out. And it's my personality. I jumped out of an airplane. I went skydiving because I'm terrified of heights. Terrified. Now I'll never jump out of an airplane again because I couldn't feel my legs for 45 minutes after I got to the ground. I mean, I was terrified, but like I just have embraced that idea of like, I'm just going to rebel against my fear and go, you know what? I'm going to look even more ridiculous than this. I think that's what David said to his wife, Michael, of like, who cares?
All right. So you've been in leadership in the local church, leading at district events, things like that for over 20 years. What are some of those things that have adjusted, changed in yourself, or even on more of a global, national level?
Yeah. Wow. I will say I've probably grown more as a leader than the people under me have grown under my leadership, to be honest with you. The thing, okay, let me start this way. The things that haven't changed is the hunger to really see people come into their fullness.
Mm.
It's just really amazing when that glow hits their face, that sparkle hits their eye, and that confidence hits their spirit. That is like, wow, God did this. I would say my greatest successes have been when I've made other people successful. And I talk a little bit about this in the book, not to keep referring to this, but it's really a passion of mine, is that when I started to elevate in my leadership status or portfolio, I don't really know how to say a business way of saying that, but I was ranking up, right? That's fair to say. I felt God really say to me, or my commitment to God was, the thing I'm going to do with my turn is make it other people's turn. I'm going to give the stage away, or I'm going to give the mic away. And what it's done is that it's made people go to bat for me, people more loyal to me. And I'm not even I'm trying to make other people famous or explore their gifts. But it was like the more I gave away, the more I got in my leadership capacity and my leadership role and bandwidth. And I have incredible friends and, ministry collaboratives and ministry counterparts that are like, it's because you didn't hog the limelight, and leading from the shadows, leading from the sidelines is a very powerful influence and key to, I think back to what Jesus did when he fed the 5,000. He was like, you give them something to eat, you do it. And I just tried to model that, but I didn't do that all the time. I mean, early on, I was trying to be the guy. I was trying to be the hero, and I found my lid pretty quick. Truth of the matter is, I probably have the capacity to pastor 25 or 30 people crowd max. And I did a really good job anytime my groups outgrew that, bringing it back down to my max. I did really good at like, ooh, let's bring it back down. Not even intentional, because I was chasing success, but I just kept coming back down. And then when I decided to just start leading leaders and giving away that, the limelight, if you will, or that stage, boom, things started growing exponentially. And so to me, that would just be the greatest leadership lesson of how can you just make others succeed? Those would be your greatest successes, really.
So we talked about kind of your failures, your mistakes as a kid, right? Drugs, alcohol, all that kind of stuff, right? but I'm sure along the journey of these 20 years, you've probably made a couple of mistakes, and you even talk about some of those in the book. So talk about some of those and how you've learned, and maybe some suggestions on how we, the listeners, can learn from our mistakes in life.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned about myself and the human brain in general is that our brain does not like to think. I know that that sounds counterintuitive. Our brain likes to assume and jump to conclusions. That's what our brain is trying to be so automatic that it's like, oh, if this, then that. If this, then that. So if Ryan's looking at you this way, then that means he feels this way about you. And that has gotten me into so much trouble. My brain has caused my mouth to move and my feet to move and my decision maker to move more quickly. And so I've gotten into so much trouble with that, whether it's with a boss or a parent or, you know, I guess age old narrative is the pitfall between the kids pastor and the youth pastor, you know, kind of a thing, you know, because we just are assuming, oh, well, if you're doing this, now I'm going to assume your motives, and I'm going to assume your agenda and your behavior and your attitude and all these kinds of things. And so one of my greatest lessons are I actually was in a meeting yesterday, and I wrote this down on the meeting agenda to myself. This was a note to Tom: ask more questions, don't assume. Because I felt the tension building inside of me, and I had to just get in my brain's way and go, nope, ask one more question before you respond. Just ask, just ask one more question before you pipe off. And maybe my brain is right to assume those things. Yeah, you know, maybe I've been around the block enough times that the assumption is pretty accurate, but at least pausing and asking that question, one more question, allows me to tone down my response to not throw more fuel on the fire, if you will. So to me, I mean, the examples of times where I got heated arguments with my bosses, which, you know, by God's grace didn't get fired when maybe I should have, or, you know, those kinds of things, or with that parent, you know, or even with that student where you're just going, what, you know, kind of a thing. I mean, I got into a heated conversation with a parent getting off a bus. I was coming home from Six Flags. The bus broke down. We're now 4 hours late. And then a parent's chewing me out in the parking lot. And I was just like, you need to get in your car now and leave, you know, kind of a thing where it was just like, what are you And I'm like, would one more question have helped me represent myself better? And it's not even, I mean, we can justify it. I had every right. I had every reason. I was tired. I was grouchy. Nothing was going right. There's a lot of reasonings. But what's the story that we want to tell? You know, what's the story that we want to tell? One more question might help us with that. So I hope that answers your question
Great.
adequately.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. So I know you're really passionate. One of those things that I know, just kind of knowing you for over a few years, one of those big things that I think that you've ran into headlong is your own personal health journey.
Yeah.
And I know you're passionate about helping other people with their health journey. So, want to just kind of share a little bit about that journey, and maybe I know there's a lot of people that want to take back their health a little bit. So maybe just some what was that journey like for you, and maybe some a couple words of encouragement.
Yeah. Thanks so much for asking that question. So to give kind of like where I'm at, and then some background, and then some things moving forward, I'll try to address that in 3 points, because that's what a good sermon looks like. But to date, I have lost just over 80 pounds. So for me, that was like, I tell people I lost a third grader, to put that into perspective. If you have a third grader, they're probably somewhere around 80 pounds. That's what I lost. And the moment of decision came because I had done every kind of diet, Atkins, carbs are the enemies, you know, weight loss challenges, all kinds of things. But the moment that made it stick was I was speaking at a large youth convention. There's thousands of kids. I'm talking to them about leading their communities, leading their school, leading their cities, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I caught a glimpse as I was kind of floating the crowd of myself on the Jumbotron. And I didn't recognize myself or like what I saw. And a thought hit me and said, you're challenging these nearly 3,000 students to go be leaders, and you're not leading yourself. And I realized that physically I wasn't showing up giving my best. And I was tired, I was more irritable, all kinds of things. I was having some health symptoms. They weren't anything crazy, but like things like blood pressure, cholesterol, sleep apnea, just different things like that, right? And so I was like, I walked off the stage that day and I was like, I'm different from now on. I'm going to start leading myself. And it started with my health journey. And so I got a health coach, a nutritional health coach, started following a very tight structure. I needed somebody to tell me what the structure was because I like a checklist. So I got a plan that would give me a checklist. And I was like, boom, here's what I'm supposed to eat. Here's how I'm supposed to eat it. Here's when I'm supposed to eat it. And I don't have to think about it. Right. So that's just how Tom's brain works. And so I started following that, lost the 80 pounds. And really in the process, I found all kinds of other areas, right? That the food and not leading myself in a lot of areas. I wasn't leading myself spiritually. I wasn't leading myself as a leader, right? And it wasn't just nutritional and, what I look like. I'm not today. I wasn't then. I'm not trying to chase a beach body or a physique type. Even though I live in a beach community, I don't hardly ever go. I'm sorry for those who don't and hate me for that. But I was I want to be the best version of myself because then I can give the best version of myself. Because one of the things I found out, I mapped out my personal identity in the midst of all of this. I said, who is it that I want to be and become? And one of the things I said I wanted to be and become was ridiculously generous. And I kind of mapped out what that wanted to be, what that meant. It wasn't just money, but that means taking care of myself physically, nutritionally, fitness wise, so that I can be the best version of myself and show up and give the best version of myself to people, whether it's my wife, my kids, my family, the ministry. And so it's been an incredible process. And the book kind of came out of, how am I showing up and giving the best version of myself? I do talk a little bit about my health, but it's not a health book, right? So I don't want anybody to get misconstrued, but it awakened other things in me of what other possibilities was I not doing or exploring because my health kept getting in the way or I didn't have the bandwidth to do it. So it kind of awakened other things and other adventures that we're trying. So that's
Love it.
that.
Love it.
Yeah.
So talk about the book writing of the book journey, right? I've asked, I'd love to ask this question to people who've written a book. So talk about kind of that journey for you. Did you like follow a structure and outline, or did you kind of like organically come together? Did you outsource things? What was kind of your process?
Yeah. So three things I would say. One was the book does pretty much look like that table of contents that I wrote in 2009. I actually just stuck with that. So because of that, it already had given me the framework of here's the things I'd want to talk about. They pivoted because I've grown and may I be so bold as to say matured, but at least developed, right? So the table of contents definitely gave me a structure to follow of what it is that I wanted to say. But then the other thing that was like huge key for me was and probably gave me some writer's block at first. Instead of trying to write a book to the masses, I didn't write the book to the masses. I actually I visualized one single person sitting in a chair across the table from me and said, "What would you say to that person?" And that person actually knows who he is, and I've stated who that is, kind of a thing to him, and it helped kind of just like when I talk about relationships and marriage. Somebody who's been married for 10 or 15 or 20 years, I would talk about relationship and marriage very differently to somebody who is single, not yet married, maybe single and ready to mingle, right? And so by just focusing on one single person, it helped me kind of really laser focus, like, what is it that I want to say in this project? Now, the next project, I'm going to figure out somebody different to sit in that chair. But that was kind of my process. And I did partner with somebody who's helped partner with other authors and go, okay, help me find all the threads here, because one of the things in the book that I talk about is that everybody needs a coach. We need to find a coach. And since I mean, if Michael Jordan, number one basketball player of all time during his day, he had Phil Jackson and he had a coach who was trying to bring the best. And I was like, I've never written a book, so I should hire a writing coach to help me through this process. And so I did have somebody come along and partner with me. I'll tell you this, my wife has read the book more than 10 times, she can't see the coach's fingerprint. She's like, oh, this is all Tom Hammel. So it's not, it's all my content. It's not their content, but they just help me make sense of it. Right. So
Yep, I love it. So many different ways of getting a book done and written, because it's just such a feat, and it's so emotional, and so tough. Especially a book like yours, that where you are sharing so many personal stories and misfailings or failures or whatever. You're sharing so many of those. It gets very emotional and very taxing. And I've heard some of the authors, and even the book I wrote, you're like, man, you just feel like kind of the weight of the words that you're saying. And even just kind of the pressure of like, is anybody actually going to care about this? You're kind of
right.
like, well, so there's just all that at play there. So Tom, I think, so grateful for you to fight through all of that, to do all the hard work, to lean straight into that, write this book. Such a helpful book, such great topic. And like you said, it has a lot of different pieces of stories. And so it's not just a health book or just a ministry book or just a business. It kind of covers a lot of different areas. So no matter where you're at in your life, this book can help you. And so I want to encourage you guys all to go get it. So Tom, where do they get it? What's the best spot?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon. You can get all the links on our website, and I did bonus stuff that was not even in the book on one of the seasons of the podcast. So ROUR cultivatedlives.com is the book and the podcast and those kinds of things. Or you could just search my name on Amazon and find it, The Life You're Meant to Lead by Tom Hammel. So those are the places to get it. We're actually exclusively on Amazon, so I'll let you know when you can go get it at Hobby Lobby. But in the meantime, Amazon is the place to pick it up. So thank you for that, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Guys, I want to encourage you guys, connect with Tom, the podcast, the book, blogs, all kinds of stuff. Great, great content coming out pretty consistently. So I want to encourage you guys, connect with him. And again, thanks guys for listening. We'll have a great episode for you coming up here real soon. So stay close. Make sure to subscribe and like and share this. Can't wait to be with you guys again here soon.